The radar dome looked like a cracked egg on a hill, half collapsed, surrounded by busted antenna masts. I climbed up because the wind was getting mean and I wanted walls. I'd been hiking since late afternoon, following a washed-out service road that kept vanishing under sand, and I was already pissed at myself for trusting a shortcut. My phone showed 1 bar, then none. The GPS that drifted like it was drunk. My water was low and my lips kept splitting. I kept arguing in my own head, turn back and freeze in the open, or push to the only structure I could see and gamble it wasn't full of bullshit. I chose the walls. The slope was loose rock and trash. Something metallic snapped in the wind and clinked against the mast like a nervous tick. I slipped twice and caught myself on rebar that bit through my glove. I told myself the cut didn't matter. Everything mattered out there. I reached the dome, found a door half buried in drifted dirt, and put my shoulder into it until the frame groaned. The door popped open, and I stepped into a room full of dust and old wiring. It smelled like rust and mouse piss. My boots scuffed through powder and left black prints. I swung my headlamp around and saw ripped panels, dead consoles, and wires hanging like guts. I tried to shut the door behind me, and it wouldn't seat right. It kept clicking open a finger's width with every gust. That pissed me off more than it should have, like the building itself was refusing to hold still. I shoved a chunk of concrete in the gap to wedge it, then listened again. I told myself I'd sit, eat a bar, warm up, and get the hell out at first light. Then I noticed the cables. Not scattered, not chewed and left, dragged into a pile and twisted together like somebody made a nest out of them. The ends were stripped clean, copper showing. There were bite marks in the rubber, spaced wide. I crouched and saw bits mixed into the nest that weren't insulation or tape. Teeth, little bones. At first I tried to laugh it off. Rats, owls, whatever. My laugh came out thin and stupid. In the corner, behind a busted cabinet, there was another pile. Bigger pieces. A jaw. A long bone with deep grooves in it, like something had clamped down and torqued. I aimed my light closer and saw dried smears on the concrete that didn't look like oil. I didn't touch them. I didn't want to know. I stood up fast, felt my stomach roll, and got mad at myself for even coming in. The wind outside sounded safer than that corner. I should have left right then. I didn't. I kept moving because I'm stubborn and because the door behind me was the only thing between me and the cold. I found a hallway and followed it with my headlamp. The corridor ran deeper than it should have, lined with empty racks and doors to little side rooms. Everything was covered in grit. My footsteps made a soft crunch that sounded way too loud. My batteries were already dying from a cold. The beam went yellow, then flickered, and each blink made my pulse jump. I stopped, dug in my pack for spares, and found the plastic case empty. I'd packed it and left it on my kitchen counter like a genius. I said fuck out loud, and the word bounced off the walls. I kept going anyway, trying to step on clear concrete and not on the cable messes that snagged my laces. I nudged a door open with my boot, and it squealed. I froze, listened, heard nothing. I moved on, trying to stay quiet, then I kicked a metal can by accident. It rolled and hit the wall, and the sound rang through the building like a bell. The echo went on and on, bouncing around the dome. I waited for it to die, holding my breath like that would erase it. A second later, I heard a matching clank from somewhere deeper, like someone answered. Same weight, same sharp ring, but not an echo. A reply. That was the moment my brain stopped pretending. Somebody was inside. Somebody heard me. I killed my light and stood still. In the dark, I could hear my breathing and the wind worrying the shell of the dome. Then I heard footsteps scraping concrete. Slow, measured, coming toward me. Not running, not stumbling. Like whoever was had time and wanted me to know it. I tried my phone again, thumb shaking, screen dim in the dark. No service, no emergency call, just a useless rectangle. I jammed it back in my pocket so I wouldn't waste batteries staring at nothing. My mouth went dry. I backed into the near side room and shut the door most of the way. My hands searched for anything that could hurt. I grabbed a broken pipe off the floor because that's what I had. I braced myself behind a desk and tried to breathe through my nose so it wouldn't whistle. A beam of light slid under the door, thin and steady. It paused like the person holding it was listening. The beam shifted side to side, slow checking. I saw the bottom edge of a boot past the crack, close enough that I could make out dried mud on the sole. The steps didn't hurry. They didn't need to. The light moved on. The footsteps passed. I heard them drift farther down the hall. I waited. My legs cramped. Sweat cooled on my back and turned into chills. I told myself to stay put until morning. Then I told myself that was bullshit because I didn't have food or heat and I'd be trapped if they came back. I tried to move without making noise. I slid my foot, eased the pipe, eased my pack. I moved the wrong way and bumped a cabinet. The cabinet rocked, then tipped, then slammed down flat. It wasn't a loud bang. It was worse, a heavy crash that filled the dome and kept ringing. The footsteps stopped, dead. The beam snapped back under the door like it got yanked. I didn't think. I yanked the door open and bolted. My headlamp came on by reflex, stuttering yellow, and I sprinted down the hallway, half blind, banging my shoulder on a rack. Behind me, the other light flared brighter and chased my shadow along the wall. I heard a quick scrape like something metal got lifted or dragged. I ran harder. The floor pitched, and I almost went down on loose cable. I cut left, then right, and my shoulder clipped a doorway. Pain shot down my arm, but I kept moving. I saw a stairwell sign and slammed into the door. It stuck. I hit it again, and it gave. I took the stairs two at a time, pipe clanging off the rail, not caring anymore about noise. Halfway up, I heard the stairwell door below open, followed by steps starting up after me. That sound was close enough to make me taste panic. I dropped the pipe to free my hands and heard it bounce down the steps behind me, making its own damn announcement. My headlamp flickered and I slapped it like an idiot, praying it wouldn't die. The top door was chained, or looked chained, but the chain was loose. I shoved through and burst onto the roof. The wind hit me and tried to throw me sideways. I caught myself on a cracked parapet and scanned for a way down. That's when I saw the truck, parked behind the dome where you couldn't see it from the road. Not abandoned, not sanded over. It sat like it had been driven there this week. There were footprints in the dust leading from the truck to the barrels and back, crisp edges, not old. Under a tarp, near it were plastic barrels stacked in a row. The tarp was tied down with fresh rope and duct tape, bright against all the faded junk. A shovel was stuck in the dirt like a marker. There was also a fresh patch of ground that didn't match the rest, darker, disturbed, and flies clustered over it, even in that dry air. I caught a sour, sweet stink on the wind for half a second, and it made my eyes water. I gagged and swallowed it down because making noise felt like painting a target. My stomach dropped again, but this time it was clear, sharp, simple. I didn't dig. I didn't need to. Below me, the stairwell door banged. The sound cut through the wind. I pictured someone stepping out, seeing me freeze on the roof like a target, then taking their time. I ran. I sprinted across the roof, ducked under a bent mast, and found the far side where the hill dropped away. I slid down on gravel, fell, got up, slid again, tore my glove open, didn't stop. Once my feet hit flatter ground, I forced them to keep a rhythm. I looked back once and saw a shape at the roof line, not waving, not calling out, just watching. My lungs burned like I'd swallowed sandpaper. My legs wobbled, but kept working because the alternative was a hole in the ground. I kept running until my lungs seized and the sky turned black. I stumbled into a dry wash and ran in it because the banks hid me for a few seconds. I heard gravel crunch behind me, then stop, then start again like they were pacing me instead of chasing. I didn't have the strength for a sprint anymore, so I kept moving and refused to sit down, even when my vision started tunneling. I kept waiting for headlights to blast over me, but they stayed back, steady like a leash I couldn't see. Behind me, an engine started and followed at a distance, patient, like it knew the desert had plenty of time to finish their work for them. I followed a shortcut line on a paper map and watched the track fade into nothing. The GPS kept jumping a kilometer at a time like it had a stutter. I stopped, got out, and saw the wind already brushing my tire marks flat. I should have turned back then. I kept going because I didn't want to lose face in front of the guy riding with me. He'd been needling me since we left pavement, acting like he owned the desert because he'd watched a few clips online. He kept poking the map, saying the line had to connect. I knew it was bullshit. I still drove. Pride is a dumb fuel, but it burns hot. The road thinned into two pale ruts, then into scattered stones, then into nothing but hard dirt with a few old tire scars. The horizon didn't change. The Jeep shook like it was coughing itself apart. My buddy kept lifting his phone, watching the little arrow spin, then shoving in my face. I snapped at him to quit doing that. He laughed and told me to relax. That laugh made me push harder on the gas just to prove something. We hit a dry wash and the rear axle clunked once hard, then started grinding. The sound came up through the seat like teeth on bone. I tried to feather it, keep it rolling, and the grind turned into a deeper crunch. My buddy told me to just send it. I told him to shut the fuck up. He got offended, like I'd insulted his mother. I limped the Jeep forward until it locked up and refused to move. When I tried to back up, the rear end hopped and stuck again. I killed the engine fast because I smelled hot metal. We got out and the heat slapped us. No shade, no trees, no sound, just air that felt like it was bleaching us. I crawled under with a cheap wrench set and a jack that kept sinking in sand. The drive shaft wouldn't turn. The axle housing looked twisted just enough to ruin everything. I tried rocking the wheel, tried loosening anything I could reach, tried anything that didn't require a shop. Every attempt ended in that same dead stop. My buddy paced and cursed and kicked the tire. He blamed me for trusting the map. I blamed him for pushing. We burned energy arguing because we didn't know what else to do. Day heat cooked us. Night dropped and froze us. The same place tried to kill us twice. We wedged the tarp for shade, and the wind ripped it loose and whipped us in the face. We rationed water, then fought about the rationing. He took secret sips. I caught him when I heard the bottle crinkle in the dark. He said he needed it more. I called him a selfish bitch. He shoved me. I shoved him back. After that, we sat in the Jeep, backs turned, listening to the metal tick as it cooled and the wind rattled the doors. The next day, the GPS did that jump again, a whole kilometer at a time, like it couldn't decide where we existed. Once it said we were on a highway. I stared at the empty flat land and laughed until my throat hurt. We had a flare, but lighting it felt like admitting we were lost for real. My buddy wanted to save it for later, like we were going to schedule our emergency. We got into it again. He kept saying we should walk, that sitting was coward shit. I kept saying you don't walk into a blank horizon and expect it to hand you a road. By afternoon, the heat got inside my head. I started hearing an engine that wasn't there. My buddy heard it too, and we both climbed out, scanning like idiots, squinting until our eyes watered. The wind rose, the sound formed, and then it vanished. He wiped his face and got mean, telling me this was all on me, that he'd never let this happen if he'd been driving. Then he tried to prove it by climbing into the driver's seat and starting the Jeep again, mashing the gas like anger could unlock metal. I yanked the key out before the grinding could get worse. He swung at me, missed, then sat there shaking, jaw working like he was chewing rage. A string of camels appeared at dusk, moving slow, heads low. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then I heard the soft thuds and saw the line of bodies cut across the sand. A herder walked with them, hands tucked in his sleeves, face cracked by sun and wind. He didn't look surprised. I waved, pointed at the Jeep, did the helpless shrug. He watched, then motioned us to follow. We trudged after him to his camp. Distance light again. It took forever. A round gur sat low against the wind, smoke leaking from the top. Inside, it was warm and rank, animal and ash. I walked in and tried to act grateful. I kept my hands open. My buddy came in like he was on a tour. He spotted a kettle and grabbed at it like it belonged to him. No asking, no pause. The herder snapped something short, and his face hardened like a door slammed. We got bowls of salty milk tea. I drank because refusing felt like a challenge. My buddy made a face and set his bowl down hard, loud. He muttered gross and smirked. I tried to rein him in with a look. He ignored it and started pawing at our bags, pulling things out, showing off gear like it bought him status. He even laughed and said we'd pay for help, like that word meant anything out here. After dark, more men arrived. They came in quiet, boots heavy, eyes locked on us. They drank. They stared at our stuff like it was already divided up. My buddy got louder. He joked. He laughed. He pushed like he couldn't stand being the small one in the room. One of the men held a hand out, palm up, and said something flat. My buddy answered with that same ugly confidence and made a half step forward, like he was about to negotiate with his chest. One of the men slammed him down and tied his wrists with rope like he'd done it 100 times. No drama, just practiced hands. My buddy thrashed until the rope bit, and he understood. Someone hit him once, open-handed, just to reset the room. Another man yanked my pack and dumped it on the floor, shaking out every pocket. Passport, phone, cash, knives, everything spread in the dirt like evidence. Someone picked up my flare, turned it over, and smiled at me without warmth. I didn't negotiate. I didn't bargain. I watched for a lull. When their attention shifted to my buddies kicking and cursing, I slid low to the back of the gur, lifted the fabric edge, and crawled out into the cold like a rat. I heard my buddy make a sound behind me. Maybe my name, maybe just pain. I didn't answer. I hate that part the most. The wind sliced through my clothes and made my eyes water. I ran anyway. My lungs burned. Behind me, I heard a quick burst of voices, then soft padding. Wolves. Not howling. Just feet, more than two, keeping pace in the dark. I couldn't tell if the men were behind them or if the wolves were the only ones hunting me. Either way, I didn't stop. I tripped, went down, skinned my palms, and got back up with sand stuck to blood. I stumbled into a shallow pit lined with broken boards and dropped into it to hide. My foot hit air and I fell. The boards shifted and creaked, and I bit my tongue so I wouldn't make a sound. The boards had old dried shit on them and hair stuck to the nails. The smell punched my throat. I gagged and swallowed it down because opening my mouth felt like dying. A nail caught my shin and tore fabric. Warm blood slid, then went cold fast. I curled up and went still. I listened to wolves circle the rim until my legs went numb. They sniffed. Sand trickled down on my face. A paw scraped above my head, and I froze so hard my teeth hurt. I could hear them breathe, wet and close. I thought about my buddy tied up inside that gur, and my stomach twisted. I told myself I'd go back at first light. I knew I was lying even as I said it in my head. Fear made the decision for me, and I let it. When dawn came, the cold eased just enough for pain to show up. I crawled out, blinking against the light, and walked. I didn't look back. I walked until my feet felt like raw meat, until the sun started baking again, until the air turned white with heat. Every dark speck on the horizon turned into a rock. Every time, my hope died a little. I found a road by accident, a hard line cut through the flat. A truck came later, and I waved like a lunatic. The driver stared at me, then let me climb in. The cab smelled like diesel and cigarettes, and that smell felt like safety. I tried to explain with hands and broken words. He drove without looking at me much, jaw tight. In the nearest town, people asked questions and wrote things down. I gave them the last GPS mark, the camels, the gur, whatever scraps I had. They asked if we'd been drinking, if we'd been provoking, if we'd been stealing. I wanted to scream. We provoked the desert. Mostly my buddy provoked the wrong room at the wrong time. They said they'd look. They said it like a routine. I waited. No one came back with him. When I asked to go with anyone, they told me no, told me I'd die out there too, and I didn't fight them. I never saw my buddy again. I told myself he lived. I don't believe it. The front tire blew so hard it ripped the fender liner and sprayed rubber strips across the track. I braked, slid sideways, and stopped in a bowl of rock and dust with no other tracks in sight. The wheel fought me the whole way down, like it wanted to yank me into the open plain, and when I finally stopped, the silence hit harder than the blowout. No Verts, no other engines, just wind and that ticking sound of hot metal cooling. I sat there with my hands clamped on the steering wheel, jaw tight, trying to decide if I was more pissed or more scared. I got out, and the heat slapped me in the face. The tire wasn't just flat, it was filleted. Black strips hung off the rim. The fender liner inside the wheel, had ripped loose and kept tapping the body. Tap, 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 like somebody knocking from inside. I yanked it back, tried to wedge it with a rock, and it snapped free again. I dragged the jack out, dropped to my knees in loose grit, and shoved it under the frame. I started cranking. The jack sank like I was lifting the Jeep on flour. I moved it a foot. Same shit. I dug with my hands, scooped dust away, and jammed flat stones under the base until it stopped wobbling. Wind picked up and started sanding my face like it hated skin. I wrestled the spare out, rolled it over, and went for the lug nuts. First nut, nothing. Second, nothing. The last driver had rounded them off like a careless asshole. I leaned on the wrench until it slipped and my knuckles smashed metal. Pain flashed white. Skin split. Blood welled up and then dust stuck to it instantly, turning it into gritty paste. I swore harder than I needed to because the sound made me feel less alone. I tried again, slower, setting the wrench as tight as I could, putting my weight straight down, and it still slipped. I kicked the wrench, then hated myself for wasting energy, then picked it back up and kept going. I shoved a rock under the wrench handle, used my boot like a lever, and finally got one lug to crack loose with a snap that shot pain at my wrist. The jack creaked and the Jeep shifted, and I froze with my heart pounding, then cranked the jack tighter and told myself not to get crushed out here over a goddamn tire. I got the wheel off in ugly pieces, the shredded tire flopping like a dead animal. I slid the spare on and started threading the nuts. 3 grabbed, 2 spun like they were stripped. I swapped them around, forced them, backed off, tried again, and it kept doing the same thing. I started arguing with myself out loud. Not even sentences, just fuck and come on and don't do this, like the hardware was listening. I cinched the 3 that held until my forearms burned and the wrench bit into my palm. I stared at the 2 that wouldn't bite and felt this nasty little wave of panic because I could already picture the wheel wobbling off 10 minutes later. I told myself slow, driving beats dying, and I told myself I was lying to myself, and I still stopped because I didn't have another option. I got 3 nuts tight and told myself it would hold. That's when I saw the storm. A brown wall rolling across the plain, moving fast and clean, like somebody dragging a curtain over the world. It didn't drift in. It charged. I threw the jack and wrench inside, slammed the door, and started the engine. The first hit rocked the Jeep hard enough that the seatbelt slapped my chest. Visibility collapsed in seconds. The horizon disappeared. Grit crawled into every seam, hissed across the glass, and poured through the vents. I kept the engine running because the noise made me feel less alone, but the intake started choking. The motor coughed like it was eating sand. I tapped the gas, and it stumbled, and I pictured the filter getting packed solid, pictured myself sitting in a dead box, and I shut it off to save it and instantly regretted it because the silence made me feel smaller. I checked my phone even though I already knew. No service. I opened my maps anyway and stared at the blue dot floating in blank tan nothing. I had GPS screenshot saved because I thought that made me prepared. Now it just meant I had proof of where I screwed up. The wind slammed the door panels. Something under the wheel banged and scraped. That torn liner or a strip of rubber, and every time it hit, I flinched. Dust coated my tongue. My eyes burned. I kept wiping my face, and the grit kept coming back. Then I heard another engine. Not mine. Close. It rose and felt like someone was idling and blipping the throttle. It moved around, not straight past, like whoever it was searching. My brain jumped to help because it wanted to survive, And I hated that part of me because it's the part that walks into traps. I should have stayed in the Jeep, waited for the storm to thin, kept my body inside metal. Instead, I stepped out with my shirt over my mouth and walked toward the sound. The wind shoved me sideways. I took maybe 10 steps and couldn't see my own Jeep anymore. That hit me hard. How fast you can lose the only thing keeping you alive. I turned to go back, try to count steps, try to follow my own footprints, and realized the wind was wiping them clean. I kept moving anyway and ended up walking in a tight circle without noticing until my boot hit the same chunk of rock twice. My stomach dropped. I stopped, turned again, and the world gave me nothing back. Headlights cut through the dust. A truck appeared like it had spawned there. It stopped hard enough that gravel popped under the tires. Doors opened. Men jumped out fast. No greetings. No, you okay? Nothing. One grabbed my arm and twisted it behind me. Another shoved me down. My knees hit rock and I tasted grit. I tried to stand and a boot slammed into my thigh, dead center, and my leg went numb like someone unplugged it. I swung an elbow blind and clipped somebody, and that earned me a shove that drove my face closer to the ground. They went through my pockets like I was already dead. Wallet, keys, phone. One of them held my phone close to his face, shielding it from the wind with his body, and scrolled fast. He found my GPS screenshots and started talking sharp, fast, like I was being sentenced. He jabbed the screen, then pointed out into the empty land like I crossed a line I couldn't even see. Another guy pointed too, wide arm, angry like the desert had a fence made of air and I'd stepped over it on purpose. I tried to explain. Tire blew. I'm stuck. I'm leaving, but my mouth was full of dust and fear, and it came out broken and useless. I snapped and lunged for my phone. Bad move. Someone yanked my hair and slammed my forehead into the dirt. Not enough to knock me out, just enough to make my brain buzz and my eyes water. They argued over me in short bursts, hands chopping the air, pointing at the map on my screen, pointing at the land, pointing somewhere behind me where my Jeep sat invisible. It felt like I'd wandered into a fight that started long before I showed up, and now I was the excuse. I tried to crawl toward where I thought my Jeep was, and a hand yanked me by the collar and spun me around like a dog on a leash. They didn't tie me. They didn't drag me into the truck. That's what made it worse. It felt like they weren't improvising. They were managing a nuisance. One of them ripped my spare fuel can off my gear pile, plastic handle creaking, gas sloshing loud. And that sound hit me like a punch because that was my margin. That was my if I get lost, I still make it. Gone. The guy with my phone stuffed it into his jacket like it belonged there. They backed away, climbed in, and the truck pulled off like they just finished taking out the trash. The lights swung once, then vanished back into the brown. I lay there for a second, shaking so hard my teeth clicked, try not to vomit, try not to cry, because crying felt like giving up. Then I forced myself to move. I crawled. Standing meant the wind could spin me again, so I kept my chest low and my hands out in front of me. My palms scraped rock, sand packed under my nails. My knuckles stung where the skin was split. I reached into my pocket out of habit and hit empty space where my keys should have been, and that empty space made my stomach drop all over again because I couldn't even hit the panic button, couldn't make the Jeep chirp, couldn't make a sound that proved it was real and near. I kept whispering, "Find the Jeep," like a prayer I didn't believe. I told myself, hit metal, any metal, and hold on. I crawled until I hit metal, hugged it, and realized it wasn't my Jeep. It was a rusted motorcycle half buried in dust, and beside it lay a human ribcage picked clean, bones packed with sand like the desert stuffed them on purpose.